The silence in the grand ballroom of the Pierre Hotel wasn't just quiet. It was heavy. It was the kind of silence that suffocates. 300 of New York's elite titans of industry, sharks of Wall Street, and socialites who eat gossip for breakfast had all stopped breathing at the exact same second. Arthur Sterling, the man who thought he owned the world, stood at the podium, his glass of champagne shaking just enough to spill a single drop on his tuxedo. He looked at the woman standing in the archway. He expected a broken ex-wife begging for scraps. Instead, he was looking at the new owner of his life. He thought he left her with nothing. But when the auctioneer read her name, it didn't just freeze the room. It burned his empire to the ground. Here is the story of how Isabel Sterling played the long game. The air in the conference room of Sterling and Vane Global smelled of stale coffee and aggressive cologne. It was the scent of ending things. Isabel sat on the uncomfortable side of the mahogany table. The leather chair was intentionally lower than the others, a psychological trick Arthur loved to use on his competitors. Today, he was using it on his wife of 12 years, across from her. Arthur Sterling looked less like a husband and more like a shark smelling blood in the water. He checked his watch, a platinum Patek Philippe that cost more than the house Isabel grew up in. "Let's wrap this up, Isabel," Arthur said, not looking at her. He was scrolling through something on his tablet. "I have a shareholders' meeting at 2. Jessica is waiting." Jessica. The name hung in the air like a bad odor. Jessica Vane wasn't just the other woman. She was the narrative Arthur was trying to sell. Young, sharp, a Harvard MBA, and the daughter of a senator. She was the perfect accessory for Arthur's next phase as a tech billionaire. Isabel, quiet, artistic. Stay at home, Isabel was the relic of his past. Arthur's lawyer, a man named Elias Croft, who had a face like a crumpled receipt, slid a heavy binder across the table. As discussed, Elias droned, his voice devoid of sympathy. "The prenup is ironclad. Mrs. Sterling, you get the apartment in Queens, the 2018 Rover, and a monthly stipend of $4,000 for exactly 24 months. In exchange, you waive all rights to Sterling and Vane, the Hamptons estate, and the liquidity pool." Isabel didn't reach for the pen. She just looked at Arthur. 12 years. "Arthur, I helped you build the prototype for the original Chimera interface in our garage." Arthur finally looked up. His eyes were cold. "Blue ice." He laughed, a short, sharp bark of amusement. "You drew some sketches. Isabel, you didn't code. You didn't secure the venture capital. You picked out the color schemes. You were a decoration. And honestly, you've been fading for years. Decorations don't get equity." He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a cruel whisper. "I'm being generous. I could leave you with nothing. But I'm a fair man. Sign the papers. Take the Queen's apartment and go find a hobby. Maybe take up painting again. You were decent at it." Isabel's hand trembled, but not from sadness. It was a tremor of pure, distilled rage. But she pushed it down. She had learned over the last decade that Arthur Sterling fed on emotion. If she cried, he won. If she screamed, he won. "There is one more thing," Isabel said, her voice surprisingly steady. Arthur rolled his eyes. "More money, Isabel. Don't be greedy." "No, not money," Isabel said. She reached into her purse and pulled out a separate file. "I want the dead assets portfolio." Arthur blinked. He looked at Elias, then back at Isabel. He burst out laughing. The dead assets portfolio was a running joke in the company. It was a collection of failed patents, bankrupt subsidiaries, and useless land deeds that Sterling and Vane had acquired over the years during hostile takeovers. It was a garbage dump of corporate mistakes. It was valued at negative dollars because of the maintenance fees. "You want the trash heap?" Arthur asked, grinning. "You want the rusted warehouses in Jersey and the patent for the— what was it? Elias, the solar-powered toaster. And the dormant entity known as Helix Holdings," Elias clarified, smirking. "It's a shell company with zero liquidity. Actually, it has outstanding tax liabilities of about $15,000. "I'll take the debt," Isabel said quietly. "Give me the dead assets portfolio, full ownership of Helix Holdings, and I will sign the divorce papers today. I will waive the monthly stipend. No alimony. Just the clean break and the garbage." Arthur looked at her as if she had lost her mind. He did a quick mental calculation. By giving her the dead assets, he was offloading tax liabilities and maintenance costs. He would actually make money on this deal. And she was waiving the alimony. It saved him nearly $100,000. "Done," Arthur said, snapping his fingers. "Elias, draft the addendum. Give her the trash." He looked at Isabel with pity. "You always were bad at business, darling. You're trading cash for debt. This is why I handled the finances." Isabel didn't respond. She waited for the printer to hum to life in the corner. Elias scribbled the new terms. The addendum was added. Isabel picked up the Montblanc pen. She signed her name Isabel Sterling. "There," Arthur said, standing up and buttoning his jacket. He didn't offer a handshake. "You're free. Isabel, try not to starve." He walked out of the room without looking back, already dialing Jessica on his phone. "It's done. She took the bait. We're clear." Isabel sat alone in the cold conference room. Elias gathered his files, giving her one last dismissive look before following his boss. When the door clicked shut, the silence returned. Isabel looked down at the paperwork. She traced the words, Helix Holdings. Arthur thought Helix was an empty shell, a bankrupt subsidiary acquired from a failed German engineering firm in 2019. He thought it was nothing but a tax write-off. Arthur was wrong, because Arthur never read the German technical appendices. He didn't speak German. Isabel did. And inside the useless Helix patent library was a dormant algorithm called Der Architekt, the Architect. It wasn't a solar toaster. It was the foundational code for quantum encryption. Arthur had just handed his ex-wife the key to the future of the internet, simply because he was too arrogant to read the fine print. Isabel capped the pen. She didn't cry. She stood up, smoothed her skirt, and walked out of the building. She had 48 hours to move into a rundown apartment in Queens, but for the first time in 12 years, she felt like the richest woman in New York. The game had just begun. The apartment in Queens smelled of boiled cabbage and damp drywall. It was a fourth-floor walk-up with a view of a brick wall and a fire escape that looked like it would collapse if a pigeon landed on it too hard. It was a far cry from the penthouse on Park Avenue with its heated marble floors and staff of 3. Isabel sat on the floor, surrounded by cardboard boxes. She had no furniture yet, just a mattress, her clothes, and a high-powered server tower she had bought with the last of her personal savings. For the first 3 months, Isabel didn't exist. To the world, and to Arthur, she had vanished. She spent her days working as a freelance translator to pay for electricity and instant noodles. But her nights belonged to Helix. She transformed the second bedroom, which was little more than a closet, into a command center. She spent weeks digging through the digital archives of the company Arthur had thrown at her. She organized the patents. She deciphered the code. She realized that the architect wasn't finished. It was about 80% complete. The German engineer who created it had died before he could stabilize the encryption key. That was why the company failed. That was why Arthur thought it was worthless. But Arthur had forgotten one crucial detail about his trophy wife. Before she was Isabel Sterling, the socialite who hosted charity galas. She was Isabel Vance, a mathematics prodigy who dropped out of MIT to support Arthur's first startup. She had buried that part of herself to be the supportive wife, to make him feel like the genius. She had dimmed her light so he could shine. Now, in the dim light of Queens, she turned the voltage back up. She began to code. She slept 4 hours a night. Her hands cramped. Her eyes burned. She lived on caffeine and spite, 6 months post-divorce. Across the river in Manhattan, Arthur Sterling was on the cover of Forbes. The headline read, "Sterling and Vane, the new gods of data." Arthur was launching his flagship product, the Sentinel. It was a cloud storage system that promised unbreakable security for banks and governments. The stock price was soaring. He was engaged to Jessica Vane. They were the golden couple. Isabel watched his interview on a cracked iPad while eating soup. "The Sentinel is impenetrable," Arthur bragged to the interviewer. "We have created a firewall that no hacker can breach. It is the pinnacle of human engineering." Isabel smirked. She looked at her monitor. The Sentinel was built on the old Chimera framework, the one she helped design. She knew its architecture better than Arthur did. She knew where the beams were strong, and she knew exactly where the foundation was cracked. She wasn't going to hack him. That was illegal, and Isabel was careful. She was going to do something much worse. She was going to make him obsolete. She finished the code for the architect. It wasn't just a security system. It was a fluid encryption protocol. While Arthur's Sentinel was a stone wall strong but static, Isabel's architect was water. It changed constantly. It was lighter, faster, and mathematically impossible to break. But she couldn't just launch it. If Isabel Sterling launched a tech company, Arthur would sue her into oblivion, claiming she stole his IP. He had armies of lawyers. She had a cat named Buster and a negative bank balance. She needed a front. She needed a ghost. Isabel created a persona. She registered a company in Zurich under the name Nemo Ventures. She used a voice modulator for phone calls. She communicated only via encrypted emails. She needed a beta tester, someone big, someone who hated Arthur Sterling. She found her target, Dominic Rourke. Dominic was an old-school industrialist. He owned Rourke Heavy Industries. He was worth billions, but his tech infrastructure was aging, and Arthur had recently humiliated him in a public bid for a government contract. Arthur had called Dominic a dinosaur playing with calculators. Isabel sent an email to Dominic's private, secure server. She knew the address because Arthur kept a list of enemies in his home office, which she used to dust. Subject: "The dinosaur bites back, mister. Rourke, Arthur Sterling's Sentinel, launches in 3 months. It has a critical flaw in the sub-layer coding line, 4055. It will fail under a localized DDoS load. I have the solution. It is called the Architect. I am offering you an exclusive license for your internal systems for 1 year, free of charge. The only condition you tell no one where it came from." when the media asks how your systems became faster and more secure than Sterling's, you simply say, evolution. Namo, 20 minutes later. Her phone buzzed. It was an encrypted text. I'm listening. Dominic Rourke was a man built of old iron and older grudges. At 65, he still ran Rourke Heavy Industries from a corner office that looked more like a bunker than a boardroom. He didn't trust the cloud. He didn't trust Silicon Valley. And he certainly didn't trust people who hid behind voice modulators. He sat before his computer, a heavy tumbler of scotch in his hand, staring at the black screen where the audio waveform of Nemo pulsed. You're asking me to install unverified code into the guidance systems of my logistics fleet, Dominic growled, his voice gravelly. If this is a Trojan horse, Sterling will own my company by morning. Why should I trust a voice without a face? The synthesized voice of Nemo replied, calm and devoid of gender or accent. Because Arthur Sterling just shorted your stock. Mr. Rourke, he's betting $20 million that your servers crash during the naval supply bid on Friday. He knows your firewall is 3 years old. He's going to hit you with a localized overload at 9 a.m. sharp. Dominic stiffened. That information was top secret. Only his board knew about the naval bid details. How do you know that? I know how he thinks, Nemo said, and I know the code he's going to use to break you. It's a derivative of a script called Medusa. It's flashy, loud, and messy. My code, the architect, eats Medusa for breakfast. Dominic swirled his drink. He was a gambler at heart, you had to be. To survive in steel and shipping. He pressed the intercom button on his desk. Get me the IT director. Now. 10 minutes later, Rourke's IT director, a nervous man named Stan, was typing furiously on a dedicated air-gapped server. They had isolated a segment of their network to test the file Nemo had sent. It's strange, sir, Stan stammered, sweat beading on his forehead. The code structure. It doesn't look like C++ or Python. It looks biological. It's rewriting itself as I watch. Run the simulation, Dominic ordered. Throw everything we have at it. Malware, DDoS, brute force decryption. Burn it down. Stan initiated the attack protocol. On the large screen on the wall, red lines of attack code slammed into the blue sphere representing the architect. Usually, a firewall would buckle. It would show strain. Bandwidth would drop. Instead, the blue sphere pulsed. It absorbed the red lines. The attack data wasn't just blocked. It was dismantled, re-encrypted, and scattered into the void. The system speed didn't drop. It actually increased by 14% during the attack. Impossible, Stan whispered. It's metabolizing the data. The harder we hit it, the stronger it gets. Sir, this is military grade. No, it's beyond that. This is NSA level. Dominic Rourke watched the screen, a slow, predatory smile spreading across his face. He picked up the microphone connected to Nemo. You have my attention. Nemo, what's your price? I don't want money yet, the voice replied. I want a seat at the table. Deploy the architect for the naval bid. Crush Sterling's interference. Humiliate him. Then, we talk about a licensing fee. Friday came. The naval supply contract was the biggest government tender of the decade logistics for the entire Atlantic fleet. Arthur Sterling, sitting in his glass tower in Manhattan, was confident. He had his Sentinels, a team of black hat hackers, on his payroll ready to disrupt Rourke's presentation feed and corrupt their data integrity. It was a dirty play. but Arthur played to win. "Execute the overload," Arthur commanded, sipping his espresso. His team tapped the keys. Nothing happened. "Sir, we're not getting a handshake," one of the hackers said, confused. "The target isn't responding." "What do you mean?" Arthur snapped. "Is their server down?" "No, sir. Their server is... It's reflecting the traffic. It's bouncing the overload back at us." Suddenly, the lights in Arthur's office flickered. The screens in the war room turned a bright, nauseating green. A single message appeared on every monitor in Sterling and Vane. "Error 404. Predator not found." Arthur smashed his coffee cup against the wall. Across town. Dominic Rourke's presentation went flawlessly. His data stream was faster than light. The naval admirals were impressed by the impenetrable security infrastructure Rourke displayed. Rourke won the contract. Sterling and Vane stock dipped by 8% by closing bell. That night, Isabel sat in her Queen's apartment, eating a slice of cold pizza. Her bank account balance was still low, but she felt a warmth in her chest that had nothing to do with money. She watched the news report on her laptop. Rourke Heavy Industries secures massive naval contract, dealing a blow to tech giant Arthur Sterling. Analysts are baffled by Rourke's sudden technological leap. She typed a message to Dominic. Phase 1 complete. Ready for Phase 2. A wire transfer hit her account an hour later. It was an advance from Rourke. $200,000. Isabel looked at the number. It was more money than she had seen in her own name in 12 years. She didn't go shopping for clothes. She didn't move apartments. Not yet. She bought servers. She hired a forensic accountant to hide her trail, and she registered Nemo Ventures as a holding company in the Cayman Islands. Arthur Sterling thought he was fighting a rival company. He didn't realize he was fighting his own past. 18 months passed. The landscape of New York had shifted, subtly but violently. Arthur Sterling was still the king, but his crown was slipping. His flagship product, the Sentinel, was receiving complaints. It was heavy. It was slow. It was expensive to maintain. Meanwhile, a whisper campaign was moving through the Fortune 500. There was a new alternative. It was invite only. It was expensive. It was called Helix. Isabel had officially rebranded. She wasn't just Nemo anymore. She was the shadow CEO of Helix Systems. She had no office, no employees other than herself, and a few remote contractors who didn't know her real name. She operated entirely from the cloud. But Arthur Sterling was not a man who let things go. He was bleeding clients' banks, hospitals, logistics firms, and they were all moving to this mysterious Helix platform. Arthur sat in his office, his face pale with rage. Jessica Vane, now his fiancée, sat across from him. She was scrolling through wedding arrangements on her tablet, seemingly bored by his business crisis. "It's a phantom. Jessica," Arthur shouted, pacing the room. "I've had PyWise look into Helix. The ownership traces back to a shell in Zurich, then to the Caymans, then to a dead-end server in Singapore. Who is doing this? Is it Google? Is it the Chinese? Maybe your product just sucks. Arthur?" Jessica said, not looking up. "The wedding is in 3 months. Are we going with the lilies or the orchids? And can you please stop hemorrhaging money? My father is asking questions about the stock price." "The product is fine," Arthur yelled. "Someone is sabotaging us, and I'm going to find them." He hit the intercom. "Send in Croft." Elias Croft, the lawyer who had drafted Isabel's divorce papers, slithered into the room. He looked older, more tired. "Find the owner of Helix," Arthur commanded. "I don't care what it costs." Bribe bankers, hack the registrars, find me a name. I want to sue them, and then I want to bury them." "We're trying, Arthur," Elias said soothingly. "But the encryption, it's unlike anything we've seen. It's almost familiar, though. The syntax. It reminds me of the old German prototypes we bought years ago. The ones we scrapped." Arthur froze. "The ones we scrapped." "Yes. The Helix acquisition. But that was garbage. We wrote it off." "Who has the rights to that?" Arthur asked, his voice low. Elias frowned, checking his files. "Well, technically, we divested that asset during the divorce. It was part of the dead assets portfolio. We gave it to Isabel." The room went silent. Arthur stared at Elias. Then he started to laugh. It was a dry, incredulous laugh. "Isabel?" Arthur wheezed. "You think Isabel is running a global encryption empire?" "My ex-wife, the woman who couldn't figure out how to program the coffee maker." "It's unlikely," Elias admitted. "She's living in Queens. I had a tail on her for the first 6 months, just to be sure she didn't violate the NDA. She buys groceries. She goes to the library. She walks in the park. She's a nobody." "Arthur." "Exactly," Arthur said, dismissing the thought. "She probably sold the patent to some shark for pennies. And that shark built this. Isabel is too soft for this game. She's probably teaching art classes to kindergarteners." He walked to the window. Looking out over the city he felt was betraying him. "But just to be sure," Arthur said, a cruel glint in his eye. "Let's flush her out. Let's see how she's doing." "How?" Jessica asked, finally looking up. "The gala," Arthur said. "The Sterling Foundation Gala next week. It's the event of the season. Everyone will be there. Rourke, the senator, the press. I'm going to announce the launch of Sentinel 2.0. I'm going to crush Helix publicly." He turned to Jessica. "And I want you to invite Isabel." Jessica laughed. "You're sick. Why would you invite your broke ex-wife to our engagement gala?" "Because I want to see her face," Arthur said. "I want to see her wearing a cheap dress, eating my food, looking at us. I want to remind myself that I won. And if she did sell that patent to someone, I want to press her for the name. I'll corner her." "She won't come," Elias said. "Oh, she'll come." Arthur smirked. "Curiosity is a powerful thing, and I'll send a car. Make it irresistible. Tell her. Tell her I have some of her old paintings I want to return. She's sentimental." The invitation arrived at the Queen's apartment in a black velvet envelope embossed with gold leaf. Isabel picked it up with manicured fingers. She wasn't wearing sweatpants anymore. She was wearing a silk robe that cost $2,000. Her apartment in Queens was still her base, but the inside had changed. It was soundproofed. The technology on her desk was worth millions. She opened the card. "Mr. Arthur Sterling and Miss Jessica Vane request the pleasure of your company." Isabel read the note attached. "Isabel, I found some of your old sketches in the attic. Thought you might want them back. Come for a drink? No hard feelings. Arthur." She knew exactly what this was. It was a summons. It was a power play. He wanted to parade her around as the poor ex-wife. He wanted to verify that she was broken. She walked to the mirror. The woman looking back was not the same woman who had left that conference room 2 years ago. Her hair was cut into a sharp, chic bob. Her eyes were clear and dangerous. She picked up her phone and dialed a number. "Dominic," she said. "Nemo." The gruff voice answered. Or do I call you Isabel now? Isabel is fine, she said. Are you going to the Sterling Gala next week? I'd rather eat glass. Dominic grunted. But yes, I have to make an appearance. The industry expects it. Good, Isabel said. I need a favor. I need a dress. And not just any dress. I need something that stops traffic. And I need you to liquidate 4% of my holding in Rourke Industries. I need cash, fluid, untraceable cash. What are you planning? Dominic asked, sounding amused. Arthur thinks he's inviting a ghost to his party, Isabel said, staring at her reflection. I'm going to show him what happens when you summon the dead. And the patent? Dominic asked. Elias Croft has been sniffing around the German registries. Let him sniff, Isabel said. By the time they figure it out, it will be too late. The trap is already set. Arthur is launching the Sentinel 2.0 at the gala. Right, that's the rumor. Perfect, Isabel said. Because Sentinel 2.0 has a fatal flaw. It relies on the cloud architecture I built for him 10 years ago. He never replaced the foundation. He just built a taller tower on quicksand. And you're going to pull the plug? No, Isabel said softly. I'm not going to pull the plug. I'm going to freeze the water. She hung up. Isabel spent the next week preparing. She didn't just buy a dress. She commissioned armor. She went to a discreet couturier in the West Village, a woman who dressed European royalty and kept her mouth shut. They designed a gown of midnight blue velvet, so dark it looked black, with a neckline that was daring but elegant. But the masterpiece was the jewelry. Isabel used her dividends to rent with an option to buy a necklace of sapphires and diamonds that had once belonged to a Russian countess. She wasn't going as the ex-wife. She was going as the competition. The night of the gala arrived. The Pierre Hotel was glowing. The paparazzi lined the red carpet, screaming the names of the arrivals. Arthur, Jessica. Over here. Arthur looked magnificent in a bespoke Tom Ford tuxedo. Jessica was dripping in diamonds, wearing a white gown that looked suspiciously like a wedding dress. They held court at the top of the stairs, greeting the senator, the bankers, the sharks. So glad you could come. Arthur beamed, shaking hands. He felt invincible. Tonight, he would unveil the new system, stock would jump, and he would finally crush the rumor of Helix. He checked his watch. She's late. Who? Jessica asked, distracted by her reflection in a window. Isabel. I told the driver to pick her up at 7. Maybe she got cold feet, Jessica sneered. Or maybe she didn't have anything to wear. At that moment, a silence rippled through the bottom of the staircase. It started at the door and moved upward, like a wave. The flashbulb stopped popping for a second, then erupted in a frenzy that was twice as bright as before. A car had pulled up, not the town car Arthur had sent. It was a vintage Rolls-Royce Phantom, silver and black. The driver opened the door. Isabel stepped out. She didn't look down. She didn't look nervous. She ascended the stairs with the grace of a panther. The midnight blue dress caught the light, shimmering like a deep ocean. The diamonds at her throat were blinding, but it was her face that stopped the room. It was the face of a woman who knew secrets. Arthur's jaw went slack. He dropped the hand of the senator he was greeting. "Who is that?" the senator asked, staring. "That," Arthur whispered, his throat suddenly dry, "is my wife." "Ex-wife," Jessica hissed, digging her nails into Arthur's arm. Isabel reached the top of the stairs. She didn't approach Arthur. She didn't even look at him. She walked straight past him, leaving a trail of expensive perfume, a scent of bergamot and cold steel. She walked directly to Dominic Rourke, who was waiting by the bar with a smirk on his face. He kissed her hand. "You're late," Dominic said, loud enough for the nearby circle to hear. "Traffic in Queens is terrible," Isabel said, her voice clear and melodic. "But the view is getting better." The room whispered. Why is Dominic Rourke, Arthur's sworn enemy, kissing the hand of Arthur's ex-wife? Where did she get those diamonds? Is she dating him? Arthur felt a vein in his temple throb. He couldn't let this stand. He had to regain control. He had to humiliate her before she humiliated him. He marched over to them, Jessica trailing behind him like an angry ghost. "Isabel," Arthur said, his voice loud, projecting for the audience. "I see you spent the alimony check all in one place. Did you rent the jewelry, or did you steal it?" The room went deadly silent. This was the drama they craved. Isabel turned slowly. She looked at Arthur with an expression of mild amusement. "Hello, Arthur." "Hello, Jessica. You look stressed. Is the stock market keeping you up?" "Don't play games with me," Arthur snapped. "You're making a scene. I invited you out of pity to give you some old junk. I didn't invite you to parade around like a pretender." "Pity," Isabel repeated, tasting the word. "That's funny. I came out of pity for you." "For me," Arthur scoffed. "I'm the CEO of a $10 billion company. You are unemployed." "Actually," Isabel said, raising her voice just enough so the board members nearby could hear, "I'm self-employed, and I'm here because I heard you were launching Sentinel 2.0 tonight. I wanted to see it." "You wouldn't understand it," Jessica spat. "It's code, Isabel, not a watercolor painting." Isabel smiled at Jessica. It was a terrifying smile. "Is it?" Isabel said. "Well, let's see. Arthur, why don't you start your presentation? I think everyone is waiting." Arthur glared at her. "Fine. Watch and learn." He turned to the crowd, clapping his hands. "Ladies and gentlemen, if we could take our seats. The future is here." As the guests shuffled into the ballroom, Arthur grabbed Elias's arm. "Get security ready to escort her out the moment I finish the speech. I want her thrown onto the sidewalk." But as Isabel took her seat at Dominic Rourke's table, front and center, she placed her clutch bag on the table. Inside, a small, modified transmitter hummed to life. She wasn't just here to watch. She was here to demonstrate. The lights dimmed. The giant screen behind the stage lit up with the Sterling and Vane logo. Arthur took the podium. "Tonight," Arthur boomed, "we end privacy breaches forever. Tonight, I give you the Sentinel." He pressed the button on his remote, and that was when the room froze. The silence in the grand ballroom was absolute. It was a physical weight, pressing down on the chest of every billionaire, politician, and socialite in the room. Arthur Sterling stood on the stage, his hand still extended toward the massive LED screen behind him. His finger was frozen on the remote control. He had pressed the button. He had expected the sleek, silver logo of Sentinel 2.0 to appear, accompanied by the triumphant orchestral swell of Hans Zimmer's Time, which he had paid $50,000 to license for this exact moment. Instead, the screen was black, not the black of a deactivated screen, but the terrifying, backlit black of a system that has just died. "Technical difficulties," Arthur laughed nervously into the microphone. His voice echoed too loudly in the dead silence. "Just a moment. The Wi-Fi in here is historic, shall we say?" He pressed the button again. Harder. A low, mechanical hum began to vibrate through the floorboards. It sounded like a jet engine powering down. The lights in the ballroom flickered once, twice, and then dimmed to a murky brown. Then, the screen came to life. It wasn't the Sentinel logo. It was a command line terminal. Cruel. Simple. White text on a black background. It scrolled faster than the human eye could read, a cascade of data pouring down the screen like a digital waterfall. System failure. Kernel panic. Encryption. Key invalid. Source code unauthorized. Cut the feed. Arthur screamed at the tech booth, his composure shattering. Cut the damn feed! But the technicians in the booth were helpless. Their consoles were locked. The override codes weren't working. The scrolling text stopped abruptly. The screen cleared. In the center, a single, pulsating image appeared. It was a geometric shape, a double helix, twisting infinitely. It was beautiful, hypnotic, and to Arthur Sterling, it was the face of the devil. Below the symbol, words typed themselves out, letter by agonizing letter, projected 20 feet high for all of New York to see. Property of Helix Holdings. Access denied. Reason theft of intellectual property. A gasp went through the room. It started in the front row with the board of directors and rippled back to the press pit. Theft. Someone whispered. Did the screen just say theft? Arthur was hyperventilating. He looked at Jessica. She was staring at the screen, her mouth open, her face draining of color. She knew what Helix was. Everyone knew what Helix was. It was the rival that had been eating their market share. But Arthur knew something else. He recognized the font. He recognized the specific shade of blue in the Helix logo. It was Cerulean 414, the exact color Isabel had painted their nursery in the house they never bought. He turned his head slowly, like a rusted machine, toward table 7. Isabel was still sitting there. She hadn't moved. She was sipping her champagne, the bubbles rising in the flute. She looked bored. Dominic Rourke, however, was grinning. He raised his glass to the stage. Arthur. Dominic's voice boomed across the silent room. I think you have a bug in your system. You did this, Arthur roared, pointing a trembling finger at Dominic. You hacked us. This is corporate sabotage. I'll have you arrested before you leave this building. I didn't do anything, Dominic said, leaning back. I'm just a guest. But if you're looking for the owner of the IP you're trying to sell, I believe she's sitting right next to me. The spotlight swung. It wasn't the stage spotlight. It was the collective gaze of 300 predators. Every eye turned to Isabel. Isabel set her glass down. The crystal made a sharp clink on the table. She stood up. The midnight blue velvet dress flowed around her like liquid armor. She didn't walk to the stage. She didn't need to. She simply turned to face the room. Arthur, she said. Her voice wasn't amplified by a microphone, but in the pin-drop silence, it carried to the back of the room. The code you are trying to launch, the Sentinel architecture, acts as a wrapper for a core kernel. She took a step forward. That kernel is called Dare Architect. Arthur felt his knees go weak. No, he whispered. That's impossible. That was junk code. That was dead assets. It was dead because it was incomplete, Isabel said, walking slowly toward the center aisle. You threw it away because you couldn't read the German appendices. You gave it to me as a joke. You gave me the trash. She stopped. She looked up at him, her eyes burning with a cold, terrifying intelligence. I finished it. Arthur. I wrote the patch. I built the bridge. And because the Sentinel is built on top of my kernel, you are effectively renting space in my building. She pulled a small, sleek device from her clutch. It looked like a remote. And the landlord, Isabel said, is evicting you. She pressed the button. The giant screen on stage flashed red. Server wipe initiated. Deleting Sentinel protocols. Deleting backups. Deleting cloud mirrors. Stop! Arthur shrieked, jumping off the stage. He scrambled toward her, his tuxedo tearing at the shoulder. Stop it. You're destroying $1 billion. No, Isabel said calmly. I'm reclaiming my property. The Sentinel is unauthorized derivative work. Under the terms of our divorce settlement specifically. The dead assets addendum you signed without reading, I own all future iterations, developments, and derivatives of the Helix codebase. She held up the device. I own your company, Arthur. Every line of code, every server, every patent you've filed in the last 18 months. It all belongs to Helix. Arthur froze 3 feet away from her. He looked at the device in her hand. He looked at the screen, where a progress bar was racing toward 100%. Deletion complete. The screen went black. Then, the lights in the ballroom came back on. Full brightness. It was blinding. Arthur Sterling stood in the middle of the room, panting, sweating, ruined. The press cameras were flashing like strobe lights. They were capturing the exact moment a Titan fell. Isabel didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She simply turned to Dominic. I think I've seen enough, she said. The presentation was a bit derivative. Shall we go? After you, my dear, Dominic said, offering his arm. They walked out of the ballroom, through the parted sea of stunned socialites. Arthur fell to his knees. Jessica Vane looked down at him, looked at the cameras, and then did the only thing a Vane would do. She took off her engagement ring, dropped it into Arthur's lap, and walked away in the opposite direction. The room erupted into chaos, but Isabel didn't hear it. She was already outside, breathing the cool night air of Fifth Avenue. She had frozen the room. Now, she was going to burn the world he built. The next 48 hours were a blur of lawyers, injunctions, and stock tickers that looked like heart monitors of a dying patient. Sterling and Vane stock plummeted 74% by the opening bell on Monday. The SEC suspended trading by noon. The headline on the Wall Street Journal was simple, "The Helix Hostile." Isabel sat in the conference room of a high-rise in Midtown. This wasn't a rented space anymore. This was the headquarters of Rourke and Helix, a newly formed partnership. Across the table sat Elias Croft. He looked like he hadn't slept in 3 days. Beside him was Arthur. Arthur looked terrible. He was unshaven, wearing a wrinkled shirt. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a jittery, manic desperation. "You can't do this," Arthur said, his voice cracking. "The courts will never uphold it. It's entrapment. It's contract law," Isabel said, sliding a folder across the table. Page 44, paragraph C of the divorce decree. The recipient, Isabel Sterling, retains full, exclusive, and perpetual rights to all assets within the Helix Holdings portfolio, including all intellectual property, patent-pending algorithms, and any subsequent derivative technologies developed using said IP as a foundation. She tapped the paper. You built Sentinel using the Helix kernel. Arthur, you didn't write new code. You just built a fancy interface on top of my engine. Legally, Sentinel is a derivative work. It belongs to me. We can settle. Elias Croft interjected, his voice trembling. Mrs. Sterling. Isabel, we can offer a cash settlement. Arthur is willing to liquidate his personal assets. The Hamptons house. The yacht. $5 million. Isabel laughed. It was a soft, genuine laugh. $5 million? She asked. Arthur, your company was valued at $2 billion on Friday. Today, it's worth the price of the copper wire in your servers. I don't want your money. Then what do you want? Arthur slammed his fist on the table. You want to see me beg? Is that it? You want me to say I'm sorry? Fine, I'm sorry. I underestimated you. I was a terrible husband. I was a narcissist. Are you happy? Isabel looked at him with pity. I don't care about your apologies. Arthur, they're like your code, empty and copied from someone else. She leaned forward. I want the name. Arthur blinked. What name? The name of the company, Isabel said. Sterling and Vane. It's offensive. It implies a partnership. It implies you built this alone. I want the brand. You want to rename the company. I want to dissolve it, Isabel corrected. I am offering to buy out your controlling share of Sterling and Vane for $1. $1, Arthur whispered. $1, Isabel repeated. In exchange, I will absorb the lawsuits. I will absorb the debt you've racked up trying to fix the Sentinel. I will take the heat from the SEC. You walk away clean. No jail time for fraud. No bankruptcy hearings. You just disappear. Arthur stared at her. And if I say no, then I release the audit logs, Isabel said. I have proof that you knew the Sentinel was flawed. I have the emails where you told your engineers to bypass the safety protocols. That's criminal negligence. Arthur, that's 10 to 15 years in federal prison. Arthur looked at Elias. Elias looked at the floor. She has you, Arthur, Elias murmured. The audit trails are clear. If this goes to trial, you're finished. Arthur looked around the room. He looked at the view of the city he used to think he owned. He realized, with a sickening thud in his stomach, that he had never really owned any of it. He had just been playing a role, and the director had just called cut. He picked up the pen. His hand shook so violently he could barely hold it. He signed the paper. Done, he whispered. Isabel took the paper. She didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She simply signed her name next to his. Transfer the assets, she told her lawyer, and change the locks on the building by 5:00 p.m. She stood up and walked to the door. Isabel, Arthur called out. She paused, her hand on the handle. What are you going to do with it? He asked. The company. The tech. What are you going to do? Isabel looked back over her shoulder. I'm going to fix it, she said, and then I'm going to give it away. Give it away. Arthur looked confused. Make it open source. Knowledge shouldn't be a walled garden. Arthur, she said, you built walls. I build bridges. That's why you lost. She walked out. Arthur sat alone in the conference room. He looked at the $1 bill Isabel had left on the table. It was crisp and new. He picked it up. It was all he had left. 6 months later. The rebranding of the New York tech scene was complete. The towering glass skyscraper that once bore the name Sterling and Vane had been stripped. The sign was gone. In its place was a simple, elegant hologram that projected a double helix into the night sky. The company was now called Foundry. It wasn't a corporation in the traditional sense. It was a collective. Isabel had restructured the entire organization. She fired the sales team and hired 300 new engineers. She made the Architect Protocol open source for hospitals, schools, and non-profits, for banks and governments. She charged a premium that made her the wealthiest woman in the tri-state area within a quarter. But she didn't live like a billionaire. She still had the apartment in Queens, though she had bought the building and renovated it. She liked the reminder of where she had started. On a rainy Tuesday, Isabel sat in her new office. It was open plan, filled with light and plants. There were no lower chairs for guests. Everyone sat at the same level. Her assistant, a young woman named Clara, knocked on the glass door. "Mr. Sterling, there's someone to see you. He doesn't have an appointment." "Who is it?" Isabel asked, not looking up from her code. "He says his name is Arthur. He says he used to work here." Isabel's fingers paused over the keyboard. She took a breath. "Send him in." Arthur walked in. He looked different. He wasn't wearing a suit. He was wearing jeans and a jacket that looked like it came from a department store rack. He looked healthier. Actually, the manic energy was gone. He looked like a normal, tired man. He stood awkwardly in the doorway. "I didn't think you'd see me," he said. "I have 5 minutes." "Arthur," Isabel said, "what do you want?" He looked around the office. He saw the awards on the shelf, awards for innovation, for ethics, for leadership, awards he had never won. I wanted to return something," he said. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, velvet bag. He placed it on her desk. Isabel opened it. Inside was a flash drive, an old, battered USB stick. "What is this?" "It's the backups," Arthur said. "From the garage, from 12 years ago. The photos, the first sketches of the Chimera, the videos of us. Before." He looked at his hands. "I was going to burn them, out of spite. But I found a video of you explaining the code to me. You were so patient. You were so brilliant. And I was just nodding, pretending to understand." He looked at her, his eyes wet. "I came to say that you were right. I was a decoration. You were always the engine. I'm sorry it took losing everything for me to see it." Isabel looked at the drive. She remembered those days, the pizza boxes, the late nights, the dream that they would change the world together. "Thank you, Arthur," she said softly. "I'm moving." Arthur said, "To Ohio. My brother has a construction business. He needs a manager. It's honest work. No code, no sharks." "Good luck," Isabel said. He turned to leave. At the door, he stopped. "Jessica left me, you know," he said with a wry smile. "About 5 minutes after the gala." "I know," Isabel said. "She applied for a job here last week." Arthur's eyes widened. "Did you hire her?" Isabel smiled. "No. We have a strict no predators policy." Arthur laughed. It was a genuine sound this time. "Goodbye, Isabel." "Goodbye, Arthur." The door closed. Isabel was alone. She picked up the USB drive. She held it for a moment, weighing the past in her hand. Then she opened her drawer and dropped it in, right next to the $1 bill Arthur had signed over to her. She turned back to her computer. The screen was full of code complex, beautiful, infinite. She wasn't Isabel the ex-wife anymore. She wasn't Isabel the victim. She wasn't even Nemo. She was the architect, and she had a world to build. And that is the story of how Arthur Sterling lost an empire because he refused to read the fine print. It's a brutal reminder that in the game of life and business, arrogance is the most expensive liability you can carry. Arthur thought power came from the suit, the title, and the corner office. Isabel knew the truth. Power comes from competence. It comes from being the one who actually knows how the machine works. When you underestimate the quiet people in the room, you're usually underestimating the ones holding the keys to the exit. Isabel Sterling didn't just get revenge, she got justice. She proved that sometimes the dead assets are the most valuable things we own. If we just have the vision to see their potential. What did you think of Isabel's strategy? Would you have taken the money, or would you have burned the empire down like she did? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. If you enjoyed this story of corporate revenge and redemption, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And if you want more stories about underdogs taking down titans, make sure to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a new upload. Thanks for watching, and remember, read the fine print. See you in the next one.